So, as you can see, I've selected the theme here that I'm going for this package that I'm creating. It's called Gram Divas, aka Instagram Divas. And the focus is to take a cool pose from a model and reproduce it in a pose for Genesis 8 female. Now, speaking of inspiration, a great place to find inspiration is DeviantArt. So you see I went to DeviantArt and I've done a search for office model. This is just for this particular pose. Each one's kind of a different theme. And what the heck is this image doing, like with all these, anyway, whatever. So just looking at a couple, and I'm saving out ones that I think are suitable to make poses from. So I'll just show you the basic setup here real quick, and then we'll talk about a few tools that I use when I'm creating these, and then also how to create the thumbnail look that I've gotten here. So I first create a scene with just the dev version of Genesis 8 female, or Genesis 8 male if you're working with male, and basically I want the untextured version of the model, the dev version, and I want a couple planes here. So this plane is just typical basic geometry turned up, and I've already placed it, so I don't think there's any mystery how you do that. And then of course I always have my ground plane. Now, since you have two planes in here, you could obviously rename one to say ground plane, so you don't grab the wrong one, because from time to time I do inadvertently grab the wrong one, or delete the wrong one, or turn the wrong one off. Because this is kind of part of my gimmick. I want this, when I say gimmick, I mean just the marketing aim of this is to have a similarly dressed version of Genesis 8 female with whatever character looks like the model in the on the plane in the example. And so just to sort of show, hey, we built this from like a live action model, and who cares, man? And honestly, if I don't know if anyone's going to respond to that. It's just an idea. So anyway, ground plane, and then you might want to call this one something like reference plane. Now, so this is our folder we've set up for Gram Divas, our library. You see that I've made one called scene. So yeah, I've already created the scene, and I've rendered a thumbnail here, and that actually kind of brings me to one of the first things that I want to point out. So I've established for continuity, I've set up my own camera. This camera is always the same. I have the ground plane turned off, the back plane turned on, and the camera is set up to be a very narrow field of focus so that I get the image blurred out, because I don't own the rights to that image. And even though I'm using it for a reference, I wouldn't want to reproduce that image, in content where it could be extracted, or I'd be infringing on anybody's copyright. So ergo, wanting to blur it out in the thumbnails, like you see here, you can't tell what that image is. It's just there to show vaguely where we got the inspiration. So yeah, I've made the depth of field just by selecting the camera and going into parameters, selecting camera, turn the depth of field on, and then just move the focal distance around and make it as narrow as possible. This is how you do that right there, by the way, so that it just gets the model and nothing behind. Then when I'm ready to render off my thumbnail, I switch to that camera view, make sure that I'm in the correct folder, which I've already done all that, but you'd want to just go to the folder. Let's just do that for you. Browse the folder, copy this path, paste it into your render directory here, hit enter, select. Then I'm just going to select the name of what I'm overwriting. You can see I've already done this one. Oh, by the way, another recent learning of mine is that even though Renderosity allows you to have the name of the scene .duf, Daz does not. So in an attempt to be uniform across both marketplaces, I am trying to just delete the one that says .duf and just change the name down to this. So that should actually create that render that should actually reveal that render because I deleted the .duf. And a good point is when you're overriding, you want to make a change to this. It's going to create a .duf version of the PNG. As long as you delete it, your rendered version will show back up there. No need to re-render that. But if I were going to, I would just, like I said, set the path up, put the name in here, and if I'm rendering, so this is not a piece that's going to be distributed. This is just for my own reference that I want to have these clean scenes here. You can go ahead and render just a single file, even though here you see that I've actually got a TIP, and the effect of that is that when you mouse over it, you get the larger version, right? But let's just say it's for my reference, and we're talking about saving time here. I'm just deleting this. I don't have to have that .tip, and I can render the thumbnail at the full tip size, 256 by 256, and then I'm still going to get the same effect because I rendered it large, so you see there's the large version. Yeah, just an interesting little tidbit. Another thing here, so I'm setting up these characters to mimic the dress of the character in the reference image. You see here I've already kind of rendered this one out. Instead of having to reload that whole scene, letting all that stuff in, that's actually dynamic hair and clothing in some cases. You can just go into this folder, grab the tip file, open it with your image editor. In my case it's Photoshop. For the scenes, just for my own reference, so they look a little bit different, I'm just changing the backdrop, and then I'm saving that as going into that folder. I want to be in scenes. Just overriding that. And so super simple, just one little thing. And again, I'm not distributing that, so I don't need the .tip file. It's just for my having a pretty library when I load these out so that I can visually see what that's going to be. So there you have it. That's a quick little tip to keep your library tidy. But anyway, back to the render and post creation, and let's talk about tools for just a little bit. So again, we got an image that we like from, and Instagram is a great place as well, you know, if you're looking for just model content, which is going to be your typical best sellers, Genesis 8 female, any kind of sexy pose or whatever theme. If you're looking for cosplay, there's tons of that on DeviantArt as well. So I want to get off my render here so I can just kind of see what I'm looking at. One thing with that, you might want to turn that off because that can get in the way of selection. If I try to select through that camera, it would just select the camera. So I'm selecting the plane, going into surfaces, and the base color, I'm just navigating. I've already preset this up. Here you can see that I've got all of my images that I want to work on. So in this case, again, the gimmick is I want to have a similar dress. So I'm just going to grab, let's work on this one. It looks a little bit easier. Just going to grab that. Now, in this case, it's a little stretched. Actually, let me go with this is a good example, I guess. So I need to stretch that out. So I'm going to grab my reference plane, which we have conveniently labeled. I'm going to go into parameters. I think it's going to be the X scale. Yeah. Stretch it out just a little bit. Okay, so she's kind of leaning on some sort of an ottoman. In cases like this, you want your thumbnail to kind of illustrate, hey, it's not just floating, it's going to be on an object. So you want to create your either a cube or a cylinder would work. Go to cube. I'm going to select that in our scene. Let's scale it down just a little bit, a little ottoman sized doohickey. You can get that a little closer. With that highlighted, we want to go into surfaces. Probably just, there's a great product that makes cool clay textures. Since we're talking about tools, I use this a lot to create the look of my thumbnails. It's available at Daz. It's called Clay Style Shaders for Ivory. You don't have to use this. You certainly could just go with a color. You know, and there you have it. You could use that, but like there's really dialed in materials here. So I kind of like to look at this. Also like to look at that. So that's a couple colors that I use pretty regularly. Something that's going to look good, you know, in your thumbnail. yeah, so if you just like the look of it, get a color you like the look of. So we'll go with that. Now we've talked about this before, I think, but anytime you're moving your character around, either the rotation or turning them sideways or what have you, you want to grab the hip. You don't want to grab the full figure. This will affect how the pose is saved. So we want to kind of get in the right ballpark before we get too crazy with making rotations and turning figure and stuff. Good way to find the direction you need to, if it doesn't jump out at you, the direction you need to turn is just kind of move your perspective camera. So she's kind of going to be kind of like that. This is actually a really tough pose that I've chose here. I should have probably picked something easier. So there we go. Talking about intersections to get a natural look, I recently heard an artist who had made a pretty amazing looking set. When someone pointed out that the legs intersected, they mentioned that it was intentional to get a more natural look with clothing, and like it was a tight legs crossed type pose. And apparently Daz accepted that. So maybe there are some instances where I try to not go with any intersections, but I can see where you really need to get the best result. So something like this, I want to be real careful that the hand is not going into the arm. Although I think that would be, fine in most practical usages of this pose. That is something they will definitely ask you to fix in at least Render Rusty QA. So I try to get out in front of that if I can. Can't always. One thing here, when you have dials, you can always go into parameter settings and turn the limits off. And doing this, when you save the pose out, it will prompt the user to accept turning the limits off, kind of automatically. So you really just got to make yourself happy with the pose. I feel like the fist needs to be a little tighter. Right hand fist. There we go. Now, since this is just for inspiration, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. You just got to get to something that you like. the look of that doesn't intersect too much. Definitely getting in the ballpark right there. I went through our frame there. Once you've done this in one place, it's going to prompt you to accept that, so you might as well just do it anywhere that it helps you out. So this, in my experience, is what they like, a little bit of float between the pieces of geometry, which doesn't look as natural, but you just want to minimize that and make it just barely touch. Okay, so now we can start. Now, for my own personal usage, I would love to make the eyes go with this, but that is not accepted. So, you know, that kind of flies in the face of the rules. So they're like, no, we don't do that, you know, whatever. I'm like, okay. So now I want to make it like make sense. So she needs to be like on the ground, like she's lying on the floor and some sort of pillow or whatnot. So I'm turning the ground plane back on. I'm going to lower this. I'm going to actually make this much shorter. This is going to be the Y scale. Then I'm going to go to the figure and grab the hip like we talked about. Then we're just going to bring her down to the ground. So one thing I see is that the hand is hitting before the elbow. I want to fix that for sure. Okay, how can we do this? It might be easier just to bring that elbow up. One thing, these poses can be a little more forgiving because Rinda Rossi is not going to have this exact block to test with. So, you know, it's not like you used a specific piece of furniture from a specific set. This is kind of like generic somewhat, which I actually think that's the most valuable kind of pose anyway, because you don't, it's not like hitting the make art button. Like you need to make your own, do your own work anyway. So I don't mind that, but you know, that's me. Front and back. You know, it would have been a whole lot easier if I had not put that, made that a fist. We could undo that actually. Left hand fist. And we could go, there's one called chop. Left hand chop. And then just fingers grasp. Makes it a little bit easier to deal with in that space right there. A lot of folks neglect to pose, what's it called, the pectorals, which of course is basically just kind of like breast sway using the built-in geometry. Okay, so this is getting pretty close. This is getting pretty close right here. Starting to feel fairly good about that. So now, just have to get the body to not be going through the ground plane. So we're going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We'll be cooking with gas. Need to raise her up and probably adjust the height of the little square one more time. Poses with figures laying perfectly flat are notoriously difficult to get right. There's only a handful of them that I use from other pose sets when I'm making just renders. It's a challenge, really, to make it look natural. We can do it. It just takes time and patience. Did you know that you can pose the toes individually, which is so dope? That's a really cool feature of Genesis 8. It's the first time you can do that, I believe. Okay. So now the hip is a little bit twisted here, which I actually kind of like the look of. So we're going to do that. Bring this out. I tell you what, I'm getting a little bit nervous about losing all this work, so I'm just going to save this scene. I don't care that it overwrites that thumbnail. It's like just for my usage anyway. But again, all you have to do to dispense with that is to delete that DUF file, right? And it goes back to the rendered version. Just like that. Might make a shortcut. That was weird. Delete. Okay. So definitely want to figure out how to get as much of this thigh. They will allow some poke through, just kind of show that the figure is on the ground. Maybe a little bit much right there. I think that's going to be permissible with the leg. I'm betting that this is allowed, especially because I have that toe just ever so slightly touching. I'm betting they'll accept that. So, need to get this a little bit more into the plane. Okay, so now we gotta raise that back up just by doing this. And I'm kind of feeling this pose right now, so what I'm going to do is go to thumb. So we need to change this thumb a little bit because, you know, the size of the plane has changed. It's more horizontally laid out now. But we want to get that same kind of feel from it, you know, like we have with the others. So we're just going to do this. Need to have that. Okay, so now we have our pose. Let's just go ahead and save it. Pose presets, Graham Davis 4. Didn't have Genesis 8 selected. Kind of critical. And again, I won't explain this again, but just watch what is checked. So we want to check all rotations only. I'm going to turn off my... Oh, actually, I almost made a critical error. So we have used the pose dials. That means we have to go press Shift B to press Shift B and accept to basically bake in all of our dials to actual poses. So that's really, really important. Once that's done, it'll take a second. Once that's done, we will save this pose. So now we can save the pose, and here we go. And as always, we do not want to save expression information that is generally not allowed to be saved with the poses. You have to save that separately. So we'll just uncheck head and then just check general, which holds the direction of the head's turn, just none of the expression data. Okay, guys, that's it for Module 3. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your continued support of this series and my store at Renderosity. If there's continued interest, there will be a Module 4 involving advanced pose creation with multiple figures and hierarchical poses, where in some cases you have to get into actually editing the text file, which we've touched on, I know, in Lesson 1, but in a little more advanced way. We will be able to control some aspects that you can't actually save through the interface with VAS Studio. So stay tuned for that, and once again, thanks for watching.